All right, so the NFL draft happened. I'm not at all sure what a lot of that was about, but we have players to draft and rookie drafts to attend to. So I'm going to talk to you about a few of my takeaways in the first 2 rounds of rookie drafts. You can see my post-draft ranks and my rough rookie ranks overall draft board in my pinned tweet, in my link tree on my college database. It's everywhere, guys. First thing to know about it, it's not this is where you should draft players necessarily. It's more of a way of me evaluating of how much I like these players, where I want to draft them, and then based on ADP, I'll adjust on how much I have to actually do to get them on my roster if I really want them. So, let's talk about it. I think the cutoff line for this year's rookie draft is really the 103. I'll stretch it to the 104 just because everyone wants to have 2 favorite wide receivers, so I guess we can stretch to the first 4. That's where the first tier is. There's both running backs. There's Breece Hall as a 101, even in Superflex, and Kenneth Walker. And then there's whoever your 2 favorite wide receivers are. Personally, I like Treylon Burks still because the draft did nothing to take him out of my 1 spot. And with his draft capital, Drake London finally jumped into a range where I think most people are going to want to see him. I like him. He's my second overall wide receiver. He's in my first tier of wide receivers along with Treylon Burks. As far as players I want to draft this year, it's pretty much Breece Hall and Treylon Burks, and then a couple as cheap as I can get them. If you wanted to insert Garrett Wilson into there instead of one of those wide receivers, I wouldn't object to it too much. I think he definitely outweighs Chris Olave. I happen to know that the reason he outscores Chris Olave outscores Garrett Wilson in both my pre and post draft model is basically a 0.02 difference in their age adjusted prediction, which means nothing in reality. I think they both did very well. I feel much more confident in Garrett Wilson. A lot more of the tape analysis seems to line up with Garrett Wilson in terms of his overall production. I don't ding Chris Olave too much for staying in for an extra year. I wouldn't like him any extra if he'd come out last year, though, because there are a plethora of other wide receivers that I would have ranked over both in the 2021 class. So yeah, he's fine. He does look a little bit low in my ranks, especially for a first round wide receiver drafted right after Garrett Wilson, but that's where I'm at. I think that tier, after those first 4 picks, is a strong second tier of rookies that I'm happy with quite a few of them, and you take your favorite. Now, as you can probably see from my draft board here, somewhere, David Bell is the odd man out. I don't think I'm going to have to draft David Bell here, but honestly, weighing my confidence in how well these guys are likely to elevate to the NFL level, plus hit rates from their draft capital, and even weighing in their landing spots a little, I feel as confident with David Bell as I do Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave or George Pickens, to be honest with you. I don't have to take him there, so I want him as cheap as possible, and that's one of the reasons I do this exercise, is to find out who I really like more than others. Even in Superflex, I'm not interested in any of the quarterbacks in either of those 2 groups. I let them fall to after then. Now, the first quarterback taken in Superflex ranks should probably be, and would be for me, Kenny Pickett. But I'm going to take him after those wide receivers are gone, unless it's David Bell, and I think I can get him slightly cheaper than that, depending on where the players in my rookie drafts happen to be on David Bell. But Pickett's probably a late first round pick. The hit rates for quarterbacks outside the top 12 drop off dramatically after the first 12 picks in the NFL draft. Basically be drafted 20th overall. It's not that much different than being drafted in the second round or the third round, to be honest with you. It is different. He should be ranked first, and I have him ranked first in my overall QB1 this year. But it's a different kind of thing. So this isn't a I hate Kenny Pickens or I hate these quarterbacks. I don't have a very strong opinion on them, but they don't match up to those quarterbacks that were later drafted. Not just because they don't run enough, because Malik Willis definitely does, and all of them have really interesting landing spots, and so I think they're worth taking deep shots on. But hit rates are hit rates for a reason, and Pickett, even though he's drafted in the first round, doesn't really have a particularly strong one. To be honest, I'm interested in Trey Mcbride this year at the end of the first round. Again, I want him as cheap as I can get him, depending on where everyone ends up with their own ranks and their own draft boards. But Trey Mcbride honestly has a production profile that matches up to anyone's, including Kyle Pitts last year. He actually has one more 1,000-yard receiving season in college than Kyle Pitts did, in that he had one and Kyle Pitts has none. Now, that's a fun thing to say, but honestly, yard categories like that don't mean a lot. But looking at his actual production stats, yeah, he's as productive as most tight ends could possibly hope to be before the draft. And I think Arizona's doing some interesting things. In the draft, they finally kicked off the offseason, it felt like. They went and got Marcus Brown. They added a few receiving weapons around Kyler Murray. I think it was a pretty interesting draft for Arizona, and I think Trey McBride is actually a part of that. And so the other thing about tight ends is that their value pretty much remains the same even after mediocre seasons, because as a rookie, because we know they take a little bit longer. So there's a little insulation there. It's the same reason I would start to think about the quarterbacks after that second tier of rookies, which are mostly wide receivers. Now, entering the second round, or my second round, if I'm the only one drafting, without really taking the temperature of my league mates or ADP or anything else, running backs do start to get a lot more interesting. Both Rashaad White and Isaiah Spiller ranked very high in my pre-draft model, or reasonably high in my pre-draft model. For 2022, they ranked pretty high, okay? Compared to other classes, not so much, but I was really interested in them as prospects. They fell in the NFL draft a little bit. An element to the 2022 class is landing spot is almost more interesting than draft capital, especially after you get outside that second tier. Now, Rashaad White's going to sit behind Leonard Fournette. I think it's Leonard Fournette's job. I still think he's a buy in dynasty. He's one of those running backs I'm really interested in adding, because he's probably a top 12 running back next year. And he's old, so dynasty players tend to not want old running backs. But Rashaad White was a really good player in college. Again, ranked really high in my pre-draft model. Third round draft capital. But again, the draft capital isn't nearly as interesting. The fact he's a productive running back going to a team that I think is going to continue to be productive as long as Tom Brady's there at least. And so I'm really interested in him. I actually rank him above James Cook, who got the draft capital in the NFL draft, who people might start overreaching from. I think James Cook's a really good running back in more of a role player type position, hopefully more of that receiving running back. I've heard JJ Zachariason and others mention that the Bills have been trying to add a receiving back this offseason, and JD McKissick and others, and they think James Cook might be their answer to that, having not been able to add those receiving backs. That makes a lot of sense to me, but I don't want you to overdraft the upside there. James Cook could be a J.D. McKissick and have really productive fantasy seasons, but just because he's drafted in the second round does not mean he's the same prospect from my perspective as someone like Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker, who were also both taken in the second. I think James Cook and also Sky Moore are two players that there's always going to be someone more interested than me in them this year, which is weird for a number of reasons, and especially since Sky Moore probably would have been my type of guy a couple of years ago. Team adjustments don't work, but you can take context of individual situations and just know that they are true. Western Michigan's been exaggerating wide receiver stats for numerous seasons. Corey Davis and Sky Moore look like very different producers than the Dwayne Eskridges of the world, but they also played at a younger age in that particular conference, and it's been a long time since wide receiver stats from that particular team actually mattered as much of even players from the same conference, from teams in the same conference. So I like Sky Moore. I actually like him quite a lot, but I think there's people going to be more interested than me in every draft. One of the things I'm worried about in 2022 class is where do I take Rashaad White and Isaiah Spiller, because I want to take them, but if they're being drafted in that early second round where I really expect to be trying to get David Bell late first, early second, above what I expect the consensus to be, but reasonably enough adjusted for the risk of the fact he's a third round pick coming from Purdue, then where do I get Rashaad White and Isaiah Spiller? Because those are the two running backs outside the top two at the very top of the first round. Again, I'm as interested in them as James Cook, and I think more people are going to be more interested in James Cook because he got that second round capital. Yeah, I think that's most of my main takeaways. Don't take a quarterback early in 22, even superflex drafts. It's really rare for me to feel that way in rookie drafts. Second round shots at Malik Willis, because he got an interesting landing spot. His draft capital sucks. Even Sam Howell being drafted in the fifth round, at least that landing spot is somewhat interesting. Washington could use a better quarterback emerging, and I have heard positive things about Sam Howell's profile. Dennis Ritter being drafted to Atlanta is interesting, and the third round sucks. Even Matt Corral, third round going to Carolina. The landing spot is better than the draft capital. Got a lot of other things to talk about in this class. Off-field issues with George Pickens. We've got deeper players that I'm really interested in and undrafted free agents, but I just wanted to get a video out to you all because I know it's been a minute where I've been database crunching, and actually life got a little crazy there for a while during the draft. So I just wanted to get some thoughts out to you on this draft class. I think there's a very strong tier 1 up to the 4th pick overall, and I think that's where you trade into. If you can, at reasonable value, trade into the top 4. Honestly, for me, it really cuts off to the top 3. And it's relative to how badly you need a running back, and I normally need a running back pretty much all the time. Check out the database, check out my ranks. Remember, they're not a go draft David Bell in the mid-first round. I don't think you have to do that. They're not where I would draft them. This is how confidently I would feel if I'm the only one in the draft, and then I adjust to where ADP and where my league mates probably are in their value. Ultimately, we want every player as cheap as possible, right? So yeah, check them out, or don't, or ask a question, or don't. Anyway, thanks very much. Have a good rookie draft, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, thanks for checking out another video. If you could like, subscribe, comment, that'd all be great. But also check out the rest of the channels, or follow my Patreon link to see what I'm up to over there. And the Linktree link, I guess, is going to take you to easy access to my podcast, the articles I'm writing over there at DLF, as well as most of the other things I'm up to. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks very much.